Hi, my name's Hayden, and I'm a people pleaser. Pretty much my whole life, the way that I went about getting what I wanted was to be nice to people. I thought that in being nice to people and telling them what they wanted to hear, that in return, I'd get the love and attention that I was looking for. Looking back, it's pretty obvious that this started for me when I was a kid. I didn't feel like there was a lot of room for me in my family, so the way that I got attention was to be the nice guy, to be the mediator that everyone got along with. And that sort of worked for me as I grew up. My shtick became being the nice guy. In high school, I had a lot of friends. I was on homecoming court. I accomplished a lot in college and in the first few years of my career. And while on the outside, it looked like everything was great, on the inside, I was fucking miserable. I had no close relationships because I was terrified to share with people how I really felt. I had no boundaries. I let people walk all over me. And I did what everyone else wanted because I didn't think I was allowed to want anything. And fundamentally, people-pleasing for me is an unhealthy focus on others before self. And there's a lot of ways that that shows up and expresses, but for me, some of the biggest things that I struggled with as I grew up were I had a lot of trouble setting boundaries. I had trouble saying no. And generally, I felt like I was just too nice. And while these things don't seem like they're all that damaging or terrible, I actually want to talk about why people-pleasing is pretty manipulative. And I want to do it through the lens of power and control. And I would assert that there are two main ways that we express power and control, or we use power and control to get what we want. And on one side of the spectrum, you have overt power and control. These are your rude, aggressive, mean jerks. They're the people that use power and control outwardly in order to manipulate and get what they want. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have the nice, submissive people pleasers. These are people who are afraid of overt displays of power and control, so they use more covert methods of manipulation. Again, there's a lot of different ways that that shows up, but three of the biggest that I've seen. The first is what I would call self-censoring. Self-censoring is not sharing the full breadth or depth of your experience, your feelings. Something happens and you don't share it with someone because you're afraid of how they're going to take it. The second is reciprocity tallying. People pleasers tend to be so afraid of owning their needs and desires that they give a lot in the hopes that they'll get that in return without having to ask for it. And submissiveness. They submit. They let people walk over their boundaries. They say yes to everything. It's just easier to submit and stay nice and comfortable. And when we think about overt and covert displays of power, I think that people-pleasing is particularly insidious because people-pleasers don't have as much feedback, external feedback. If you're a jerk, someone will tell you you're a jerk. But with people-pleasers, that tends not to happen. And I think this can lead to what I would call infantilization. People-pleasers, they're just too nice. They can't help it. Or if you are a people pleaser, it's, I just want everyone to be happy. But the issue with this is if you infantilize someone, you take away their responsibility to actually do something about it. Another reason people pleasing is particularly insidious is because it is manipulation disguised as generosity. People pleasers can sometimes become righteous. Don't you see how much I love you? Don't you see how much I want to put your needs before my own? It becomes really difficult to call out. And ultimately, what I find is that people-pleasing and intimacy are mutually exclusive. You think that you know people-pleasers, but you don't have the full story. They're not willing to bring the full story, which results in inauthentic relationships. So the question then becomes, what do we actually do about it? And I wouldn't be doing my job as a coach if I didn't give you some steps or some things to look out for in breaking up people-pleasing. And the first is to build awareness, to actually get aware of these people-pleasing behaviors, both in yourself and in other people. We can't change it until we can name it. So becoming aware and building awareness is extremely important. The second is getting responsible, taking ownership of those things, how they've showed up, how they've impacted our relationships and the relationships we've built with people. And then third is getting messy. It's going to require more overt displays of control and power, and that's ultimately just going to be messy, and we have to be okay with that. Part of the reason why I think this is so important is because on the spectrum, we actually want to move towards the middle. It's the place where we don't need to control or manage any aspects of our life. We actually just get to sit in trust and surrender in spirit. We get to be with everything that comes up. And that's what I hope for all of you, everyone listening, if you're a people pleaser, if you know people pleasers. And so I'd invite you to get aware, get responsible, and get messy. And please join us in People Pleasers Anonymous.